here. 3, 2, 1. Oh, never mind. We're already recording. Very good. Well, welcome everybody. Thanks for holding on through last week. I don't know if everybody got the message, but I left my book at my dad's house when I was on my way to my brother's, and I didn't realize that until about 11 o'clock at night. And I said, well, let's just wait till next week. It'll be fine. I was also a little concerned that I might not be in a proper state, just spending a night alone with my brother to be with y'all. But we didn't. We wound up not doing much. We both turned into old men. We watched TV until about 9:30. No, it was after that. It was until about 11, and then we went to sleep. Do anything exciting. So anyway, I wanted to show something to you guys to preface our discussion today. Let's see if I can get it up. Do you see the map?
Yes.
All right, so here's Babylon. This is where our peeps are, and we're going to hear about the Medes and the Persians today. And the Median Empire is up here, and the Persian Empire is down here. Now, they are both Indo. Well, they both share a heritage, Indo something background. And at the time of Daniel and Ezekiel, the Persians have absorbed the Median Empire. And so... but the Medes still have like a favored position in the Empire of Persia because of their shared language and their shared background, their shared racial makeup. All right.
Okay.
All right. So last time we gathered, we had the Persian Empire overrun Babylon. Remember?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. We had the writing on the wall and all of that stuff. So we pick up today. Let me get out of this. We pick up today with chapter 4, praying as usual. And if we could, we're going to hear the story about Daniel in the lion's den, which is like really familiar to us.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to see kind of the interplay between the Mede overseer in Babylon and Daniel and their relationship and all the other like kind of upper management of the empire. And it's a familiar story, but let's hear it again. Would anybody care to read Daniel 6, 1 through 5?
Do it.
All right, thanks, Kevin.
Okay.
So it says, it pleased Darius to appoint 120 satraps to rule throughout the kingdom, with 3 administrators over them, one of whom was Daniel. The satraps were made accountable to them, so the king might not suffer loss. Now Daniel so distinguished himself among the administrators and the satraps by his exceptional qualities that the king planned to set him over the whole kingdom. At this, the administrators and the satraps tried to find grounds for charges against Daniel in his conduct of government affairs, but they were unable to do so. They could find no corruption in him because he was trustworthy and neither corrupt nor negligent. Finally, these men said, "We will never find any basis for charges against this man Daniel unless it has something to do with the law of God." So the administrators and the satraps, do I keep going through 6? How far?
Just read 6, please.
So the administrators and the satraps went as a group to the king and said, "O King Darius, live forever."
All right. Thank you, Kevin. So we have the plot kind of in place here. They're jealous of Daniel and his sway over Darius. We see right before chapter 6 in verse 30 of 5, that very night Belshazzar, the Chaldean king, was killed, and Darius the Mede received the kingdom, being about 72 years old. And so Darius is now in charge of everything. He is a Mede, not a Persian, but he's a favored status within the Persian Empire. So you see some corruption. While invaders do what?
No, yeah, I mean, they found the one vulnerability to set up Daniel.
Yeah. And I was thinking about this as I read it yesterday, and I heard it again from Kevin this morning, how like modern day politics this is.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
You've got somebody that you're jealous of, or has power you want, and then you find that one angle that you can attack them on.
They call that opposition research, right?
Yeah.
It's an industry, research. Yeah.
So yeah, that's nothing new. Politicians have always been awful people. So while invaders may retain existing bureaucrats to help them keep the government administration running, high officials normally aren't so fortunate. They are lucky to escape with their lives. The Persians made an exception for Daniel when they conquered Babylon. Perhaps it was because they heard how Daniel confronted King Belshazzar and predicted that his kingdom would fall to the Persians. No doubt the Persians could see for themselves the writing, which Daniel interpreted on the palace wall. Whatever the reason, Darius the Mede, the man Cyrus the Great chose to rule Babylon, appointed Daniel as one of the top 3 administrators in the kingdom. There's no question that Daniel was a highly competent administrator. In fact, he was so superior that Darius intended to promote him even further. This didn't sit well with the other officials. No doubt part of their resentment had to do with professional jealousy, and it's a sad fact that many people think that only way to advance is to tear down anyone they perceive as competition. Though not stated in the text, it's also probable that a bit of racial bias was involved. The Medians and the Persians administrators would have resented being under the authority of one of the people they had conquered. Whatever their motive, they couldn't find legitimate charges against Daniel to bring him down. And of course, there's a host of reasons which are evident. He was competent. He was honest. And since there was no way to accuse Daniel for how he did his job, his enemies had to find another pretext. All right. So in your own experiences, have you ever seen this happen? We talked about this in politics, but what about like at work or some other place?
Yeah, it happens in the workplace.
Some people, will do whatever to get whatever a lot of times.
Yeah, I follow pop culture probably more than I should, particularly when it goes to, areas of interest for me, like Star Wars and things like that. And what's going on at Lucasfilm is just like this. It's really interesting. The whole firing of Gina Carano and all of that under this pretext.
Right.
Yeah.
And even like Governor Cuomo, where it's all of his, I mean, he's the kind of guy that's created a lot of enemies over the years, right? And they're finding all the women that, he had inappropriate behavior and his vulnerability that they're exploiting to get rid of him.
Yeah.
Rightly so. I'm not debating, whether but it's a clear example of where, someone in power that has a lot of enemies and they're finding how to exploit his weakness.
Yeah. Unless you're Kennedy, if you've got skeletons in your closet, you shouldn't run for public office.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's pretty.
That's what I think.
And I just want to go back. Back at the start of the pandemic, I was jokingly saying that Governor Cuomo was my boyfriend. But no, I've thrown him out after all this stuff. Just saying.
Obviously, he would have loved for you to be his girlfriend.
Yeah. Yeah.
Somebody I maybe could have got, huh?
Yeah.
Or you could have at least got a casual grope out of him or something.
Well, that exactly. Ooh. Oh my gosh, no.
Yeah, what a creep. So
Turning out to be definitely looks so anyhow.
I kind of felt that same way about Bill Cosby though, Brenda, because I loved his comedy. He was always,
I know that one was hard for me too because
Disappointing.
yeah, very
the
disappointing.
start of Must See TV was, the Cosby Show.
Well, and he was America's dad.
He really
I loved him in everything he did.
the pudding,
Yeah, you can do pudding. The Jello pudding pops. So that was,
So exactly, I know it's
yeah, it kind of stinks. Well, so we still see this in action today.
the other thing I thought was interesting is that they said that there would have maybe been some racial bias. That is definitely, mirrored today.
Yeah. Yeah, and I wonder if racial bias is really at play here, or if it's not just a nationalism. Because how would we feel if we had conquered a territory and then one of the conquered people had a very high ranking in the government? And I don't know that would work out too well for the United States unless they were a puppet. And certainly we've done that before in foreign affairs. But yeah, I think nationalism is kind of at play here. But yeah, and I wonder, just sometimes with stuff that the author overlays onto that's coming from outside of the scripture, I wonder about sometimes, particularly when they get to be buzzwords like racism and things like that. But I certainly think that nationalism is involved here, or would be.
Mhm.
Got it.
But it could be. Hey, I could be wrong, Brenda. That's the one thing I learned a long time ago when I got married. Whenever I say something, I could be wrong. So maybe it could be. All right, so let's go on to the Delusions of Divinity, Daniel 6:6-9.
Want me to read?
Yeah, if you would.
Okay. So the presidents and satraps conspired and came to the king and said to him, O King Darius, live forever. All the presidents of the kingdom, the prefects and the satraps, the counselors and the governors are agreed that the king should establish an ordinance, enforce an interdict, that whoever prays to anyone, divine or human, for 30 days, except to you, O king, shall be thrown into a den of lions. Now, O king, establish the interdict and sign the document so that it cannot be changed, according to the law of the Medes and the Persians, which cannot be revoked. Therefore, King Darius signed the document and interdict.
Okay, thank you, Sherry. All right. So the authority of these documents lies in the authority of the kingdoms. And this is an important thing to keep in mind, because there's other places in scripture where stuff like this comes up. And to revoke a royal edict would be to revoke the authority that it comes from. And so a king wouldn't do that, because obviously they're not going to rebuke or revoke the authority that they carry. Same thing happened for John the Baptist when Herod had him in prison and Herodias wanted his head chopped off as a favor. He didn't want to do it, but he promised anything up to half his kingdom to his daughter-in-law for that creep show dance she did for him. And that's what she wanted. And so rather than break that authority, he killed John. So these things happen. Yeah. So they found the angle. They found the proper angle to apply pressure onto Daniel.
Why did the king go along with that? What was in it for him? He wanted the praise, or
Yeah. He's a politician. I think if you'd gone up to Donald Trump and said, "Do you want people to pray to you for 30 days?" Yeah,
Great idea.
I think I would. But you could say the same thing for, well, probably not Biden because he's a strong Catholic, but yeah, most of the rest of them.
They played to his ego, right?
Yeah, they played to his ego.
to his ego? Okay.
They knew what angles to play. Okay. So the Persian Empire granted religious freedom to its subjects. This is one of the reasons the Persian Empire grew so large, is because they would conquer a space, and largely when they paid their, not their tithe, but their, what's it called? When a conquered people paid. Anyway, if it comes to me, yeah. Well, it's not a gift so much as because they have to, otherwise they'll be punished. It's not a bribe. Well, kind of a bribe, but it's not called a bribe. Anyway, if I think of it, I'll bring it up. But anyway, when they did that, and they would appoint the leadership, but otherwise they'd let the people live their lives as they had been. They're a lot like the Romans in that aspect. The Romans allowed their conquered people to retain their religious beliefs, particularly with the Jews, because it was an ancient belief. So, yeah. So it was good politics for the Persians to do that. But they were Zoroastrians, more or less, and so we're talking about the same religion of Freddie Mercury. We talked about that 2 weeks ago, I think. Freddie from Queen.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. It's unlikely that Darius actually believed that he was divine. However, one of the traps powerful people can fall into is to think that they deserve homage. Many cultures have, in fact, taught that rulers are divine and should be worshipped. Undoubtedly, Darius was flattered by the suggestion that people should pray to him, but there may also have been a political calculation in his agreeing to issue the decree. It would drive home to the whole population of the province of Babylon that there had been a change in administration and consolidate Darius's control over the province. Aside from taking upon himself a right which belongs only to God, Darius did not realize there were two flaws in his plan. The first is that Darius didn't know the proper purpose behind it, and the second was that the officials presented the scheme to Darius as unanimous advice on all upper levels of officials, which means that Darius would have assumed that Daniel would have been in on it and approved it. And so we're going to see what happened to Daniel, and we'll see that next. But so let's see what happens to Daniel 10:14.
I'll read it.
Thanks, Linda.
Although Daniel knew that the document had been signed, he continued to go to his house, which had windows in its upper room open toward Jerusalem, and to get down on his knees 3 times a day to pray to his God and praise him, just as he had done previously. The conspirators came and found Daniel praying and seeking mercy before his God. Then they approached the king and said concerning the interdict, "O king, did you not sign an interdict that anyone who prays to anyone divine or human within 30 days, except to you, O king, shall be thrown into a den of lions?" The king answered, "The thing stands fast according to the law of the Medes and Persians, which cannot be revoked." Then they responded to the king, "Daniel, one of the exiles from Judah, pays no attention to you, O king, or to the interdict you have signed, but he is saying his prayers 3 times a day."
All right. Let's do 14 too, Brenda.
Oh, I'm sorry. When the king heard the charge, he was very much distressed. He was determined to save Daniel, and until the sun went down, he made every effort to rescue him.
Okay, so the stage is set for this thing to work. The trap has sprung. It is interesting the way the satraps went to Darius. Oh, did you not say, as in like this whole thing was Darius's idea?
Yes, it is. Yeah.
They're jerks. They're jerks. But this is politics. This is total politics. Confronted with such a decree, the simple and obvious thing to do was to refrain from praying publicly until 30 days were up. If Daniel had prayed where no one could see him or stopped praying altogether, the plans of the enemies would have been failed. It says a lot about Daniel's integrity that his enemies knew he would not compromise his convictions to accommodate the law. So, yeah, keeping religious conviction in the face of exterior political threat is a big theme in this story. Have you seen this play out at other times or in history?
You know, it came to mind the Jewish people in Germany.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and too, Sherry, I thought of Germany too during the war, but I thought of the church, and particularly Bonhoeffer and the few pastors that rejected the Reich and spoke against it. Because by and large, the German church came into the fold of the Nazi party. But Bonhoeffer didn't, and some others didn't. They had to flee to America. And Bonhoeffer went to, what was it, United Seminary or whatever it was in New York. And finally, he went back to take part in a plot to kill Hitler, and was executed just before the end of the war, after he was caught. But then, so these people, they would not give up their convictions because of what was going on politically. And so the Jewish people that were still practicing during the war certainly did that. The church, when it's under political pressure, it should anyway, not bow to that political pressure. There was a movie that came out 5 or 6 years ago, God's Not Dead 2. Did you guys see that one?
Yeah, I think so. I'm trying to remember what that was about now, though.
Yeah, well, I think it took place in Houston or somewhere like that, but there was within the story of the movie, the local government required all pastors to submit their manuscripts before preaching so they could be approved. Of course, that would never really happen in real life because no pastors would do that. But for the sake of the movie, for the sake of the plot, it happened. But it did come up to vote in Houston in one election. Of course, it failed. But for that to happen, something like that to happen. So, yeah.
I think too about in recent times, all the protests that have gone on in the last year, especially, those are people that are, standing up for their convictions in some cases and, going to, being willing to be arrested for their cause or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, and I agree with you, Brenda. Making the distinction between protesters and rioters.
Right. I mean, not everybody. No, I get that totally.
But no, to speak out. We can think back to the '60s and the civil rights movement and the work of Martin Luther King. certainly. And he suffered because of it.
Yeah, a lot. Yeah, a lot of those patriots in those days. John Lewis that just died in the last year. He's a great example of somebody that lived through hell at times for his causes, for the causes, you know.
Yeah. Just the other week, we had the text of Jesus saying, "Pick up your cross and follow me." We really aren't confronted with that a whole lot, being our particular demographic in society. What are the crosses that we have borne through political unrest? Have there been any yet?
Yeah, you're right. We're pretty blessed.
Yeah. There aren't any armed men coming to our doors asking if we're Christians, and if we say yes, cutting our heads off.
Thank goodness.
Yeah.
That would suck.
Yeah. It has happened in places like Africa.
I know it is. It's mind-boggling.
But God is faithful to the one that is persistent in faith, regardless of what's going on politically. And so we see the result of God's faithfulness in keeping the lion's mouth shut while Daniel was down in the lion's den. And we think about this, I don't know, when you think about the den, what do you think about? Do you think like a cave that lions are in and they just throw them in and roll the stone or something?
I think of a pit.
Yeah, that's what it was, Brenda. It was.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what my visual is a big dark pit with lions below and they throw them in.
Yeah, and they starve the lions so
Oh.
that they're hungry to
Yeah.
eat.
Ravenous.
Yeah. And so that was the environment that Daniel was in, a hostile environment.
Hey, flashback to Star Wars. Isn't there a pit that they put people down into? They're
The
not
Rancor pit, they have that
Of course
big,
there is.
that Rancor that ate everybody up.
Yeah.
So Daniel was like Luke Skywalker,
Yeah. A giant bone.
that giant bone. Thank you, Sherry. That's forever going to be written in my mind.
Okay.
Good one, Cher.
Let's do royal cat food because this is shocking. This is shocking. Daniel 6:15 through 18.
I'll go. Here we are. Then the conspirators came to the king and said to him, King, O king, that it is a law of the Medes and Persians to not interdict on or ordinance that the king establishes can be changed. Then the king gave the command, and Daniel was brought and thrown into the den of lions. The king said to Daniel, May your God, whom you faithfully serve, deliver you. A stone was brought and laid on the mouth of the den, and the king sealed it with his own signet and with the signet of his lords, so that nothing might be changed concerning Daniel. Then the king went to his palace and spent the night fasting. No food was brought to him, and sleep fled from him.
All right, thanks, Brenda. So we have this situation. I didn't quite get to where I wanted to on this. So Daniel's down the lion's den. Darius is up all night worrying about Daniel. And so we see the relationship that he must have had with Daniel, the trust and the friendship that had grown between the two. Or at least maybe Darius is at least a just person and can see the unjustness of what has happened to him. So Darius seemed like a pretty good guy. So I'll go on here. Then at break of day, the king got up and hurried to the den of lions. When he came near the den where Daniel was, he cried out anxiously to Daniel, "O Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God, whom you faithfully serve, been able to deliver you from the lions?" Daniel then said to the king, "O king, live forever. My God sent his angel and shut the lions' mouths so that they would not hurt me. because I was found blameless before him and also before you, O king. I have done no wrong. Then the king was exceedingly glad and commanded that Daniel be taken up out of the lion's den. So Daniel was taken up out of the den, and no kind of harm was found on him because he had trusted in his God. The king gave a command, and those who had accused Daniel were brought and thrown into the lion's den. Their children, and their wives, before they reached the bottom of the den, the lions overpowered them and broke all their bones to pieces.
I mean, their children also. That's just,
No, it's a little shocking.
yeah.
The Old Testament is pretty
Yes.
crazy sometimes.
Yeah, brimstone and hellfire or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, if they punished you, they made sure it stuck.
Yeah, that's
Yeah, so that just, like the moral of the story is, be careful trying to set someone else up. It could backfire in a really bad way.
Yeah.
what goes around comes around, whatever.
Yeah.
some
Karma.
people call that karma, yeah. That's an Eastern belief, but it's really been adopted by a lot of Western thought. And while it's not part of our religious practice, it's certainly within our consciousness. It's like, what comes around goes around, and that karma is going to come back to you. And it did. And so when we talk about integrity, integrity isn't doing what you're supposed to do all the time when people can see you. It's doing what you're supposed to do when people can't see you. And that does have a way of coming back if you're a person that doesn't have integrity. It worked out for Daniel. Sometimes it doesn't, though. People have died because they've been people of integrity. But then for Christians, it's never really the end, though. We'd all like to think that we would have that kind of fortitude if someone were to confront us or say, denounce your faith or we're going to kill you. I think I'd like to say, oh, yeah, I won't do that. And maybe if it was for myself, I wouldn't, but it says, denounce your faith, I'm going to kill your kid. At that point, I might say, well, God will forgive me because I want to save my child. Hopefully we never get in those situations.
Yeah.
But that punishment, God did the same thing, though, with this punishment or those kinds of punishments. And God, in various places, will say that, I will punish you for your transgressions to the second and third generation. And we see that displayed in family systems, particularly if there's abuse or something like that that's going on. That tends to be passed down. And so the father passes that abuse to the son learns that's how you interact with your children, that passes that down to the next generation. And so these things can propagate throughout a family.
And it's hard to break the cycle and some of that stuff.
It really is.
It is.
Yeah, really, it truly is.
Addiction, there's a lot of different things that fall into those categories.
Right. Yeah. And, the government plays a part of that too, talking about right governorship. For a whole class of Americans, they've been taught how to game the system, to work only just enough so that they can get services. But they've also learned that if you work too much, you won't get those services and you can't make it. And these things are passed from one generation to the next. Yeah, government's pretty important. All All right, well, let's go to the bottom of page 26 here. Daniel's rescue had a profound effect on Darius. In the process, he learned the difference between the gods he worshipped and Daniel's God. And so maybe we have here an ulterior motive by the Lord. And I've never been one to think that God causes misfortune to happen, but I think God definitely exploits misfortune to bring about grace and his purpose and will. So in this case, the sin committed by the satraps and the presidents against Daniel and against Darius was a way, and God used that sin as a way of opening Darius's eyes to the one true God.
And it worked.
And it worked, yeah. And like I said, it was the actions of the satraps that did that. I mean, God didn't put it in their hearts to try to set Daniel up, but the Lord certainly worked through it. And so when we look at stuff like that, we can remind ourselves by this story that God is working in whatever mischief or whatever problems we're facing to bring about something good. And so we can start looking for that activity of God in the difficult times that we're going through. I think
I think if like bad things happen all the time, and it's what you do with it, right? And I think if you have a stronger faith in God, you're more likely to, see, how to turn lemons into lemonade when bad things happen.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And to look for the lesson, right?
Yeah.
I like to think that the country has done this over the last year, that we've learned some lessons.
That reminds me, we got to get those up on the bulletin board. The lessons learned.
Oh yes, yeah. We need to attach that to the board.
Maybe we can do that this week or something.
I think so.
Oh, we're running a list of lessons learned.
Yeah. So on the map that we have up in the hallway by the cafe in the fellowship hall, where there's 3 blocks surrounding the map, and one of them is something that we learned over the pandemic, and then another block is going to be something that we missed, and then another block is going to be something we're looking forward to.
Okay.
Getting back.
There's going to be expanding lists as we go along.
Yeah, so people will be encouraged to just take their pen and write whatever theirs was. So it'll be the kind of an interactive activity for the congregation to participate in. And something that I was really looking forward to, I got to experience in part last Wednesday when we had the Lenten service. I had a first communion class before the service, and it was so nice to see a room full of kids again. It warmed my heart. It's like, oh, good.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, and we had 100% participation in that class, which was good.
Good job.
And the only one that wasn't there was at the hospital getting stitches taken out of their arm.
Oh my.
So, but they were at service that night, and it was good. It felt good.
And that's 5th graders?
Those are 5th graders, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And any 6th graders that want a refresher.
Yeah, there's only one 6th grader there last night, though.
Oh.
So anyway, it'll be nice over the coming weeks as we see the 6th graders receive First Communion on Palm Sunday, and then the 5th graders get it on Monday, Thursday.
That's next week already.
I know.
It's Sunday. It's crazy.
Yeah, and we've got a baptism this Sunday.
Yeah.
I saw that. And Sherry, I think that's probably part of the Kirstens that were at Saturday night service last week.
Yes,
Yeah.
I emailed Deanne and she said if it was a guy and a girl and their little one is probably the granddaughter. So Stephanie. I
Steph,
think
yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
And the little
Which-
boy Cash is the one getting baptized.
That's what I wondered because
Yeah.
we were talking about some of the people that were at church Saturday that were newbie or hadn't seen for a while.
Oh,
Yeah.
And I think they're going to be Saturday folks because he works on Sunday.
Oh, okay.
So,
Gotcha.
yeah, that's good.
Mhm.
Okay. What do we have time for? 46, huh? All righty. The next chapter is so interesting, and reading it literally is certainly interesting and shocking, but even I'm reading it figuratively, maybe even more so. This kind of imagery of the valley of the dry bones, and prophesying to it. It evokes that sense of creation when God's voice moved over the waters of the deep. And this is the ruach, the voice, the spirit of God, the breath, the wind of God that is breathing life into things, and
Yeah.
God recreating flesh and sinew and bringing life back to people that were dead. And yeah, it's a really interesting text, and I don't want to rush it. So we can start talking about it today, or we can wait until next week, whatever you guys would prefer.
Are we doing Ezekiel or Daniel?
This is Ezekiel 37, 1 through 28. Oh, we should remember that Daniel and Ezekiel are contemporaries. They were, well, tradition has them born at the same time, 620 or so. And I think Ezekiel was older than Daniel was before he died. But Daniel was about 20 years old when he was captured by the Babylonians. And so we are now,
Okay.
when they are free, he's about 70 years. No, it doesn't matter. He was an older man
Older.
when they were released. Yeah. So anywho,
Okay.
I wondered how old he was because in one of the things it was saying, he had waited this many years, and if he was, it seemed like he had to be old.
yeah, I actually have it right here. Do you guys have any of these? These are delightful timelines. I have two. I keep them in the jacket of my binder, my Bible thing. If you want to see what that is, a Bible timeline is from I think Rose. Yeah, Rose Publishing puts this out. These are great to keep in your study Bibles because it shows not only the major events of the history of salvation, but it shows what's going on contemporaneously with the rest of the world. And so you'll see what's happening in China and what's happening in other
Oh,
places.
wow.
You can place things in world history.
And it's by Rose Bible Timeline?
Yeah, Rose Publishing, the Bible Timeline. The church should just buy a bunch of these.
We've got them in our Lutheran study Bibles too.
Oh, we do? Okay.
Yeah.
Page
Yeah, it's in
30 through
it's in the
32.
front of, yeah, I've got it in the
It's
front of
actually
mine.
really nice. Yes.
Yeah, and so you can see, so if you go to year 620, yeah, so Daniel lived from 620 to 540, so he was 60 years old.
60, huh?
Yeah, and Ezekiel went from 620 to 570, so he was really old. He was 90. No, Ezekiel was younger.
Yeah,
Yeah,
this
he
is,
was 50.
yeah, mine says Ezekiel was born a little
After 600 BC.
571
There you go,
593.
before.
Yeah, Daniel was 530 to 605.
Oh, so this is interesting. So those don't, there's some discrepancy with these timelines, which,
Yeah,
we're talking a long
Mhm.
time ago. So that's not,
right.
Right.
Yeah, it shows Ezekiel, mine, he was born 40 years after Daniel. He only lived 22 years.
no. Well, that's interesting.
Yeah.
I might have to check some other sources to see who's right.
Yeah.
Well, then
Someone's-
this is part of biblical scholarship, right? Having multiple sources and find the ones
Yeah.
that agree the most. If you have just one that says one thing, it's probably wrong. And this is one of the requirements of canon. When the canon was being put together by the church fathers way back when, they had three requirements to be part of canon. One was that it was a widely available text. Second was that it didn't contradict what the rest of the canon was saying. And the
Yeah.
third was, just the impulse and the activity of the Holy Spirit in putting it together. So that's why we don't have like the Gospel of Thomas and like the Gospel of Mary and things like that in our
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. I mean, these dates, I'm sure they're like, we're no birth certificates and death certificates.
Right.
Yeah.
It's just, it can't be 100% accurate.
No gravestone markers to go check out
Right.
with dates on them.
So all you have are ancient records, and different authorities say different things.
Yeah.
So, but regardless, when we speak about the same timeline, it's good enough. It's good enough.
When I was reading this, the dry bones, have you guys ever been in a catacomb?
No.
Talk about tons and tons and tons of dry bones.
Oh, was that in Peru?
Yeah, when I was in South America, we went through, it was and that's what they used when the Spaniards came and took over. They built all of these big churches and stuff on the sites of where all the Incan burial grounds were. Well, this was like it wasn't a monastery. It was like a nunnery or whatever they called them back in the day. And they had, it was a beautiful church, but in the basement of it was all these dead bones rooms.
Wow.
My nephew and I got really claustrophobic and had to get the heck out. It was, and Janie was still hanging in there, and Ricky and I are like, because it was small too. I mean, you just really, it was interesting. But no, that just brought back those memories of cruising through the catacombs.
Like if I see Harrison Ford, I'm getting out of here right away.
There you go.
Fun.
Interesting, but yeah, to think that God could breathe life on them and they came to life would be pretty cool.
Yeah, there's a couple of things going on here that's really interesting. Like, is this what the resurrection is going to be like? Did this, again, was this a literal thing that happened, or is this a figurative thing that happened? Obviously, it's a little figurative because it's talking about Israel, the body of Israel. But still, it's evocative. It's a really neat thing. But we need that breath of life from God to live. And that was consistent with Genesis, or the second account anyway, where God created us out of the dust and breathed life into us.
And that's what makes God a living God, right? Is the Holy Spirit living with us today.
Yeah, not a dusty, far off God, but one that is present with each of us. And that was the amazing thing about Jesus, and something that is never in the other traditions of the time wasn't present, that God would deign to put on human form and walk among us. and then to experience what we experience, suffer what we suffer, the joy, have joy in what we have joy in, and just make it so that God is close. That was the amazing thing about Jesus, that in him God came close to us. So, anywho, we'll pick up next week on the dry bones. I think I'm going to change the format a little bit. Rather than kind of going through the book itself, we may just read the sections, and I'll pick out themes just to talk about based off those sections, rather than kind of just follow the outline of the book, presuming that everyone would have read and have a background from the book. I think that'll work better. So anyone care to pray us out today?
I'll give it a shot.
Thank you, Brenda.
Dear Lord, thank you for bringing us together on this Saturday morning to learn more about you and share fellowship with each other. Please be with us as we continue on our day and weekend. And thank you very much for being the living God that you are in our lives today. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Brenda.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we'll see y'all either today, tomorrow, or sometime next week.
Sounds great.
Thank you.
Yeah, bye, everybody.
Everybody.
See ya.